commander of the hegemony's third assault fleet, had seen many species fall before the might of his empire. The towering reptilian officer stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled hide bearing the ceremonial scars of a dozen conquered worlds. Today, he gazed through the viewport of his flagship at yet another prize, a small human research station orbiting the mining planet 442b. Pathetic, hissed, his forked tongue flicking with disdain. Look at this pitiful outpost, 12 humans manning a glorified observation deck. The High Command sends my entire battle group to handle what a single patrol ship could eliminate. His second-in-command, Subcommander X, shifted nervously beside him. The younger officer had heard whispers about human military capabilities, but such talk was considered sedition in the hegemony. Sir, intelligence reports suggest these humans may have defensive capabilities beyond. Silence! His massive fist slammed against the command console. I have crushed the war fleets of the Republic. I have reduced the crystal cities of Vega Prime to dust. You dare suggest that these soft-skinned mammals pose any threat to the hegemony's finest? The bridge crew of the massive dreadnought worked in tense silence as their commander's rage filled the air. The ship itself was a monument to hegemony engineering, 2 kilometers of hardened battle steel, bristling with plasma cannons, and protected by shields that could withstand the fury of a dying star. Behind it flew 17 more vessels of varying sizes, from heavy cruisers to nimble destroyers, all bearing the crimson banner of the Third Fleet. Sir, the communications officer announced, the human station is transmitting on standard diplomatic frequencies. Put it through, commanded, settling into his command throne with predatory satisfaction. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a middle-aged human woman in a simple blue uniform. Her graying hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her brown eyes showed no fear despite facing an entire battle fleet. The nameplate on her uniform read, Dr. Sarah, Station Commander. Unknown vessels, she began in accented galactic standard, you are approaching human territorial space. This system is under the protection of the Terran Colonial Defense Initiative. Please state your intentions. Threw back his massive head and laughed, a sound like grinding stone that echoed through the bridge. Protection? Did you hear that, X? This human thinks her little research station is protected. He leaned forward, his yellow eyes gleaming with malice. Human female, I am commander of the hegemony Third Assault Fleet. You and your pathetic species will surrender this system immediately, or I will demonstrate why the galaxy trembles before our might. Doctor's expression remained unchanged. Commander, I'm afraid that won't be possible. This system contains critical research installations vital to human interests. I must ask you to withdraw from this territory. You must ask? His laughter intensified. Look around you, primitive creature. 18 warships capable of glassing your entire planet. What could you possibly do to stop us? We have our methods, replied simply. Methods stood, his massive form casting shadows across the bridge. Show me these methods. I'm curious to see what passes for military power among your kind. Doctor touched something off-screen. Very well, defensive protocols are now active. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the sensor officer's voice cracked across the bridge. Sir, energy readings are spiking across the entire system. From where? X demanded, studying his tactical displays. I can't tell, sir. It's like the readings are coming from everywhere at once. Strode to the main sensor console, shoving his officer aside. The displays showed impossible readings, energy signatures appearing throughout the asteroid belt, from the gas giant's moons, even from what appeared to be empty space itself. Some kind of sensor malfunction, he growled. These humans are trying to confuse our systems with electromagnetic interference. Sir, the weapons officer called out, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the system. Whatever they're doing, it's drawing power levels equivalent to a small star. His confidence wavered for the first time. No single planet could generate that much energy, let alone hide the infrastructure required. Yet his sensors didn't lie. Something was happening out there in the darkness. It doesn't matter, he snarled, reasserting his authority. Whatever tricks they're playing, they cannot stand against the might of the hegemony. All ships target the human station. We'll end this farce now. 17 acknowledgements came back across the fleet communication channels. The massive weapons arrays of the Third Fleet began to swivel toward the small research station. their charging cycles building to unleash destruction that could vaporize continents. Doctor's voice came across the channel one final time. "Commander, I strongly advise against that course of action. Stand down your weapons and withdraw, and this incident can be forgotten." "The only thing that will be forgotten," roared, "is your pathetic species, fire." The space around the research station erupted in brilliant flashes as dozens of plasma bolts and particle beams converged on the small outpost. The combined firepower of the Third Fleet was enough to destroy a battle station 10 times larger than the human facility. But the beams never reached their target. Instead, they struck something invisible in space, a barrier that flared with brilliant blue-white light as it absorbed the devastating assault. The energy cascaded across what appeared to be empty space, revealing the outline of something impossible. "By the great darkness," X whispered, "what is that?" The barrier stretched across hundreds of thousands of kilometers, forming a perfect sphere around the inner system. It pulsed with absorbed energy, converting the hegemony's assault into a light show that illuminated every asteroid, every grain of cosmic dust within its boundaries. "Sir," the sensor officer's voice was now openly panicked. "I'm reading massive structures throughout the system. They were hidden somehow, but the energy discharge is revealing them." On the main screen, ghostly outlines began to appear as the defensive grid's activation exposed what had been concealed. Massive installations built into asteroids, weapon platforms disguised as mining equipment, and most shocking of all, ships. Hundreds of them, sleek and deadly, emerging from stealth positions throughout the system like predators awakening from slumber. Doctor's face reappeared on the communication screen, her expression now coldly professional. "Commander, you have just fired upon a human territorial installation. That constitutes an act of war under Terran colonial defense protocols. You have 30 seconds to surrender, or we will respond with appropriate force." Stared at the tactical display in growing horror. His sensors were now detecting over 300 human vessels, ranging from nimble corvettes to massive battleships that dwarfed his own flagship. Worse, the energy readings suggested weapons technology far beyond anything in hegemony databases. "This is impossible," he breathed. "Our intelligence reported this as an undefended research system." "Your intelligence," replied, "saw exactly what we wanted it to see. Humanity doesn't advertise its defensive capabilities to potential aggressors. We find it more effective to let hostiles reveal their intentions first." "You're bluffing," snarled, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "No single system could hide that much military hardware." 20 seconds, Commander." X grabbed his superior's arm. "Sir, perhaps we should consider." "Never," shook him off. "I will not be intimidated by these mammals. All ships full attack formation will blast through whatever parlor tricks they're using." The hegemony fleet began to advance, their weapons charging for a second assault. But as they moved forward, something extraordinary happened. The space around them began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from sun-baked stone. "Sir," the navigation officer called out in confusion, "our drive systems are responding normally, but we're not moving forward. It's as if something is holding us in place." Doctor's countdown reached its end. "Time's up, Commander. Terra Defense Protocol 7 is now in effect." What happened next would be recorded in military academies across the galaxy as the most devastating tactical demonstration in modern warfare. The space around the hegemony fleet didn't explode or burn. It simply began to contract. A sphere of energy, invisible but undeniably present, materialized around its entire battle group. The 18 ships found themselves trapped within a prison of pure force that began to compress with inexorable power. "All ships, emergency jump," screamed into his communicator. "Get us out of here." But his fleet's faster-than-light drives couldn't engage. The energy field surrounding them created a localized disruption in spacetime that made escape impossible. They were caught like insects in amber, helpless as the invisible walls closed in around them. "What is this?" X demanded, watching in terror as their sister ships appeared to be crushed by empty space itself. Doctor's voice came across the channel one final time, calm and educational. "What you're experiencing is a controlled gravitational field manipulation system. We call it an energy net. It creates a localized space-time distortion that can compress matter to any desired density. Your ships are currently experiencing the equivalent of 50 times normal gravity, and that force is increasing exponentially. Watched his instruments in growing panic. The hull of his mighty dreadnought was beginning to groan under impossible stresses. Around him, smaller ships in his fleet were already showing signs of structural failure as the gravitational forces exceeded their design tolerances. "This is not possible," he roared. "No species has mastered gravitational manipulation on this scale." "Humanity has been researching exotic physics for over 2 centuries, Commander. We've had plenty of time to develop creative solutions to military problems." The first ship to fail was a destroyer on the fleet's outer edge. The sleek vessel simply folded in on itself like a crushed tin can, its crew's final screams cut short as the communication array collapsed. Then another ship buckled, and another. "Please," X broke, falling to his knees before the communication screen. "We surrender, release us, and will withdraw immediately." Doctor appeared to consider this. "I'm afraid surrender isn't an option, Sub-Commander. Your leader chose to open fire on a peaceful human installation. Terra defense protocols are quite clear about the response to such aggression." Felt his massive frame being pressed into his command throne as the artificial gravity within the energy net continued to increase. Around him, his bridge crew struggled to remain conscious as forces beyond their understanding slowly crushed their mighty fleet. You can't do this," he gasped. We are the hegemony we have conquered, 1,000 worlds." "And now you've encountered one you cannot conquer," replied. "Perhaps your empire will think more carefully before threatening human territory in the future." The last thing Commander saw before his flagship's hull finally gave way was the small human research station, completely undamaged and peaceful in the starlight, its dozen occupants having just eliminated an entire hegemony battle fleet without firing a single shot. The energy net continued its work for another 10 minutes, compressing 18 war vessels into a sphere of ultra-dense matter roughly the size of a baseball. When it finally dissipated, there was nothing left but twisted metal and the silent void of space. Doctor made a note in her daily log. "Hegemony probe force neutralized. System security maintained. Recommend increased stealth protocols for outer perimeter installations." Admiral Aura received the news of the Third Fleet's destruction while dining in the crystal gardens of Hegemony Prime. The towering officer's forearms moved in graceful patterns as she consumed the rare delicacies imported from across the galaxy, her compound eyes reflecting the artificial suns that illuminated the capital world's most exclusive district. "Impossible," she clicked in the musical language of her species, her translator rendering the words into standard hegemony dialect. "An entire battle group does not simply vanish." The messenger, a nervous humanoid from one of the subject species, prostrated himself before the Admiral's dining platform. "The automated beacon from Commander's flagship transmitted for exactly 47 minutes after arriving in the target system, my lord." Then all communications ceased simultaneously. Aura's primary eyes fixed on the trembling messenger, while her secondary eyes continued to monitor the tactical displays floating around her table. She had commanded hegemony fleets for 3 centuries, crushing rebellion and expanding their empire's borders across dozens of sectors. Nothing in her experience explained the complete disappearance of 18 warships. "Show me the sensor data," she commanded. A holographic display materialized above the dining table, replacing the ornate flower arrangements with tactical readouts. The information was sparse. The Third Fleet had entered the human system on schedule, transmitted routine status updates, then nothing. No distress calls, no battle reports, no debris signatures. "What do our long-range monitors show?" Aura asked, her feeding appendages clicking with agitation. "The system appears normal, my lord. The human research station still orbits the mining world. No signs of battle damage or elevated energy emissions." Aura's four eyes narrowed. She had studied the intelligence reports on humanity with the same methodical precision that had made her one of the hegemony's most successful commanders. The species was young, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 3 centuries ago. Their technology was primitive, their military forces scattered across hundreds of small colonies. They should have posed no threat to even a single hegemony cruiser, let alone an entire assault fleet. "Summon the Intelligence Council," she ordered. "I want every piece of data we have on these humans." Within the hour, Aura stood in the war room of Fleet Command, surrounded by the greatest military minds of the hegemony. The circular chamber was a monument to their conquests. The walls displayed the banners of 1,000 defeated civilizations, while holographic star charts showed the vast extent of their empire. Chief Intelligence Coordinator activated the central display, his scaled form hunched over data tablets as information flowed across the room. Our intelligence network has been monitoring human activities for the past 50 years, he began in his distinctive hissing voice. They appeared to pose no significant threat. Yet an entire fleet has vanished, Admiral Aura observed coldly. Explain this discrepancy. His display shifted to show human star charts. The species controls approximately 200 star systems, most containing minor colonies or resource extraction operations. Their military appears to consist of patrol ships and defensive installations, nothing capable of challenging even our smallest war vessels. Then what happened to... Grand General Hex, the hegemony's supreme military commander, stepped forward. His massive frame bore the scars of countless battles, and his reputation for ruthless efficiency was legendary across the galaxy. There is only one logical explanation. The humans must have discovered some form of... That leaves no trace. Aura's skepticism was evident in her clicking vocalizations. That destroys an entire fleet without producing debris fields or energy signatures. Perhaps some form of exotic matter manipulation, suggested Science Coordinator Ash, her tentacled form writhing with nervous energy. Theoretical physics suggests the possibility of localized gravitational anomalies that could. Theory is irrelevant, General Hex interrupted with characteristic bluntness. We face a threat to hegemony expansion. The response is obvious, overwhelming force. Admiral Aura studied the tactical displays surrounding them. The human star systems formed a rough sphere about 40 light-years across, positioned at the intersection of 3 major hyperspace routes. Control of their territory would provide the hegemony with strategic advantages worth trillions of credits in trade revenue. What forces can we deploy? She asked. Hex activated his command console, filling the air with ship specifications and fleet deployments. The second fleet is completing operations in the Rigel sector. 400 vessels, including the new Devastator-class dreadnoughts. If these humans possess some form of advanced weapon, superior numbers should overwhelm any defense. And if we lose the second fleet as well? The question hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. The assembled commanders shifted nervously, their various species expressions showing the same uncertainty that plagued their admiral. Impossible, Hex declared. No single weapon system could eliminate 400 warships. The humans might destroy a few vessels, but they lack the infrastructure for sustained combat against hegemony forces. Intelligence Coordinator cleared his throat nervously. Admiral, there are some irregularities in our human intelligence files that require mention. Explain. His clawed hands danced across his control interface, bringing up surveillance reports from across human space. Our monitoring stations have detected unusual energy signatures in several human systems over the past decade. Large-scale construction projects, massive power generation facilities, industrial operations on a scale that seems excessive for simple colonial settlements. What kind of construction? We're not entirely certain. The humans employ sophisticated stealth technology that makes detailed reconnaissance difficult. However, the power requirements suggest projects of enormous scope: planetary engineering, massive space installations, industrial complexes rivaling those of core hegemony worlds. Admiral Aura studied the incomplete data with growing concern. The reports painted a picture of human capabilities far beyond what official intelligence assessments suggested. If the species possessed the technology to hide massive military installations, could they have concealed their true strength? She asked. It's possible, admitted reluctantly. Human information security is surprisingly sophisticated for such a young species. They may have deliberately fed our intelligence networks false data while concealing their actual capabilities. General Hex slammed his armored fist against the display table. Speculation? We cannot allow uncertainty to paralyze hegemony expansion. 400 ships will eliminate any human resistance. And if you're wrong? Hex's face twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. Then, we deploy the First Fleet, 800 vessels including the Imperial flagship itself. No force in the galaxy can stand against the combined might of the hegemony. Admiral Ara was not entirely convinced, but she recognized the political realities of her situation. The loss of the Third Fleet had already triggered questions from the ruling council. Showing weakness now could cost her command, and possibly her life. Very well, she decided. Deploy the Second Fleet to human space, full assault configuration with orders to glass every human world in their path. What of prisoners? Asked Coordinator. Intelligence gathering could provide valuable. No prisoners, Ara cut him off. If these humans possess weapons capable of destroying our fleets, we cannot afford to underestimate them again. Complete extermination. The orders went out across the hegemony's communication networks within hours. In the Rigel sector, Fleet Admiral received his instructions with grim satisfaction. The massive reptilian commander had been growing bored with the routine patrol duties assigned to his fleet. A chance for real combat against a supposedly dangerous enemy was exactly what his crews needed. Signal all ships, he commanded from the bridge of the Devastator-class dreadnought Eternal Conquest. Set course for human space, maximum burn. 400 hegemony warships entered hyperspace in perfect formation. Their destination, a quiet border system where a human mining colony had recently reported unusual asteroid activity. Intelligence suggested it might be a forward operating base for whatever weapons had destroyed the Third Fleet. They would arrive in 6 days, expecting to find frightened colonists and primitive defensive installations. Instead, they would discover that humanity's reputation for innovation extended far beyond anyone in the hegemony had imagined. In the depths of space, automated monitoring stations detected the fleet's departure and began transmitting encrypted signals to stations throughout human territory. Within minutes, those signals reached a nondescript office building on Earth where Dr. Sarah's colleagues were already preparing for the hegemony's next move. They're sending 400 ships this time, reported Analysis Chief Doctor, studying the intelligence data flowing across his displays. Looks like they didn't appreciate our demonstration. 400, mused Defense Coordinator Dr. Lisa Park. We'll need to activate the Cascade network for this one. A single energy net won't be sufficient. Are we ready for that level of response? Asked. Dr. Park smiled, the expression holding no warmth. We've been preparing for this day since first contact with the hegemony. Terra Defense has spent decades developing systems specifically designed to handle large fleet actions. 400 ships is well within operational parameters. What about collateral damage? The target system has civilian populations. All non-essential personnel were evacuated last week. The mining colony is now staffed entirely by Defense Force volunteers. Park pulled up tactical displays showing the target system's true nature. The hegemony is about to discover that attacking human territory carries consequences far beyond their current understanding. The trap was set. The bait was in position. All that remained was for the hegemony's Second Fleet to arrive and trigger the most devastating military demonstration in galactic history. In 6 days, Fleet Admiral would learn that humanity's defensive capabilities were. Fleet Admiral stood in the command center of the Eternal Conquest, watching the tactical displays as his massive fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. 400 hegemony warships materialized in perfect battle formation, their combined firepower capable of sterilizing entire worlds. The reptilian commander's scaled hide gleamed under the bridge lighting as he studied the sensor readings. Unlike Commander, had earned his position through cautious competence rather than arrogant aggression. He would not underestimate an enemy that had somehow eliminated an entire battle group. Sensor sweep complete, Admiral, reported his tactical officer. I'm reading one mining colony on the second planet, population approximately 50,000. Standard civilian settlements, no obvious military installations. What about the asteroid belt? Multiple mining operations, sir. Energy signatures consistent with industrial equipment. However, the officer's voice carried a note of uncertainty. Some of the power readings seem excessive for simple ore processing. His predatory eyes narrowed. The intelligence reports had mentioned unusual construction activity in human systems. If the enemy was hiding military installations among civilian infrastructure, standard bombardment protocols would need modification. "Launch reconnaissance drones," he ordered. "Full spectrum analysis of every installation in the system. I want to know about every power relay and communication antenna before we engage." The drones deployed in waves, spreading throughout the system like metallic insects. Their advanced sensors probed every asteroid, every space station, every seemingly innocent cargo hauler drifting between the mining facilities. For 2 hours, they transmitted detailed scans back to the fleet. The data they returned was troubling. "Admiral," his intelligence officer called out, "the power generation in this system exceeds anything we've seen in human space. Some of these mining facilities are drawing energy equivalent to small cities." Weapons asked. "That's just it, sir. I'm not detecting traditional weapons signatures, but the energy distribution patterns suggest something. I'm not sure what to call it. Coordinated infrastructure on a massive scale." Studied the tactical displays with growing unease. His long experience in warfare had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct was now screaming danger. The system looked ordinary on the surface, but the underlying energy network suggested something far more complex. "Admiral," his communications officer announced, "I'm receiving a transmission from the planetary surface." "Put it through." The main screen activated, revealing a middle-aged human male in mining coveralls. His weathered face and calloused hands suggested a lifetime of hard labor, but his eyes held an intelligence that immediately caught attention. "Unknown fleet, this is Mining Director Tom Harrison of the Colonial Authority. You are entering restricted human territory. Please state your intentions." Stepped forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the bridge. Unlike, he had no interest in theatrical displays of dominance. This was business. "Director Harrison, I am Fleet Admiral of the Hegemony Second Fleet. You will evacuate your colony immediately. This system is being annexed under Hegemony expansion protocols." Harrison's expression didn't change. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Admiral. This system contains critical infrastructure vital to human interests. I must ask you to withdraw." "Critical infrastructure?" Gestured toward the tactical displays showing the mining operations. "You extract rare minerals from asteroids, hardly irreplaceable." "You'd be surprised," Harrison replied calmly. "This system serves purposes beyond simple mining. I strongly recommend you reconsider your position." Felt a chill of recognition. The human's tone, his complete lack of fear when facing 400 warships, it was eerily similar to the reports from final transmission. Either these humans were suicidally brave, or they possessed capabilities his intelligence had failed to identify. "Director, I will give you 1 hour to evacuate your population. After that, I will commence bombardment operations." "Admiral, that would be inadvisable." The transmission ended, leaving staring at the blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, but he could sense their unease. The humans were too calm, too confident. No rational species would maintain such composure when facing annihilation. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, "I'm detecting a massive spike in energy emissions throughout the system." "From where?" "Everywhere, Admiral. Every mining facility, every space station, even installations I didn't detect before. It's like the entire system is activating." Moved to the sensor console, studying the readings himself. The energy patterns were unlike anything in hegemony databases. Instead of the focused signatures of conventional weapons, he was seeing a distributed network that encompassed the entire star system. "Admiral," his tactical officer's voice carried open alarm, "I'm detecting massive gravitational anomalies forming throughout local space." Gravitational anomalies. Before the officer could respond, space around the hegemony fleet began to shimmer. It started as barely visible distortions, like heat waves in vacuum, but rapidly intensified into clearly defined spatial warping that bent starlight and twisted the very fabric of reality. "Emergency stations," commanded, "all ships evasive maneuvers." But there was nowhere to maneuver. The gravitational distortions were forming around individual ships, creating localized space-time warps that trapped vessels in rapidly contracting fields. Unlike the single energy net that had destroyed fleet, this was something far more sophisticated, dozens of independent gravitational traps, each precisely calibrated for specific vessel types. The first ships to be caught were the destroyers on the fleet's perimeter. Watched in horror as sleek warships simply folded in on themselves, their hulls unable to withstand the impossible stresses. But these energy nets were different from the weapon that had destroyed the Third Fleet. Instead of crushing the vessels immediately, they seemed to be calibrated for different levels of compression. "Sir," his communications officer shouted over the sound of straining hull plating. "I'm receiving transmissions from throughout the fleet. Multiple ships report being trapped in gravitational fields." Tried to process what he was seeing. The tactical display showed nearly 50 of his ships caught in energy nets, but the effects varied dramatically. Some vessels were being slowly compressed, their crews having minutes rather than seconds before hull failure. Others were held in steady gravitational fields that prevented movement without causing immediate structural damage. "They're sorting us," he realized with growing horror. "Different field strengths for different ship classes." His tactical officer looked up from his displays, face pale with disbelief. "Admiral, the precision required for this level of gravitational manipulation. It's beyond anything we've ever encountered." "All ships focus fire on the asteroid belt installations," commanded. "If those are the source of these fields, destroying them should—" "Sir," the weapons officer interrupted, "our targeting systems can't lock onto the installations. Something is interfering with our sensors at the quantum level." Before could respond, Director Harrison's face appeared on the communication screen again. Behind him, the Admiral could see what appeared to be an ordinary mining control center, complete with ore processing displays and shift schedules. "Admiral, I tried to warn you," Harrison said with what seemed like genuine regret. "The system isn't just a mining colony. It's a testing facility for advanced defensive technologies." "Impossible," snarled. "No single installation could generate this level of gravitational manipulation." Harrison smiled sadly. "Admiral, you're thinking in terms of conventional technology. What you're experiencing is the result of 2 centuries of human research into exotic physics. We call it the Cascade Network." On the tactical display, more ships were being caught in energy nets as the gravitational traps continued to form throughout the fleet. But was beginning to notice a pattern. The most aggressive commanders, the ones ordering immediate attacks, were being targeted first and with maximum compression. Ships that held position were caught in containment fields rather than crushing traps. "You're selecting targets based on behavior," he said with dawning understanding. "The Cascade Network analyzes communication patterns, targeting priorities, and tactical decisions in real time," Harrison confirmed. "Commanders who show restraint and attempt diplomatic solutions receive different treatment than those who immediately resort to violence." As if to demonstrate the point, a heavy cruiser whose captain had been screaming orders to target civilian installations suddenly disappeared into a rapidly contracting energy net. Seconds later, the vessel imploded into a sphere of twisted metal barely larger than a shuttle. "However," Harrison continued, "the system is quite capable of eliminating entire fleets when necessary. Admiral, I'm prepared to offer you a choice." Felt the deck plating beneath his feet beginning to vibrate as gravitational stresses affected his own flagship. Around him, his crew worked desperately to maintain control systems as space-time itself became unstable. "What choice?" he asked. "Surrender your fleet and submit to human custody, or be destroyed where you sit. The Cascade Network is currently maintaining containment fields around 200 of your vessels. I can either compress those fields to minimum radius or maintain them at current levels while we discuss terms." The Admiral stared at the tactical display, watching as his mighty fleet was systematically neutralized by an enemy he couldn't see, couldn't target, and couldn't understand. 2 centuries of hegemony naval tradition screamed at him to fight to the death rather than surrender to primitives, but had not survived 3 centuries of warfare by ignoring reality. His fleet was trapped, helpless, and completely at the mercy of human technology that exceeded hegemony capabilities by orders of magnitude. "What terms?" he asked quietly. Harrison's expression softened slightly. "Complete surrender of all vessels and personnel. Your crews will be treated according to galactic conventions for prisoners of war. Your ships will be impounded pending negotiations between the hegemony and human governments." "And if I refuse?" Harrison gestured toward something off-screen. The Cascade network can compress your entire fleet to the size of a small asteroid in approximately 6 minutes. Your choice, Admiral. Looked around his bridge at his crew, beings who had served with him for decades, who trusted him to make the decisions that would preserve their lives. The mathematics were simple. 400 ships and nearly 1 million crew members against technology that could eliminate them without effort. He began, then stopped. In the distance, he could hear the sound of hull plating beginning to buckle as gravitational stresses increased around his flagship. The choice had already been made for him. "All ships," he said into his communicator, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. "This is Admiral. Stand down all weapons and prepare for surrender." The acknowledgements came back across the fleet communication channels, each one a nail in the coffin of hegemony expansion. For the first time in 3 centuries, a hegemony fleet had surrendered without destroying its enemies. Director Harrison nodded with what appeared to be genuine respect. "A wise decision, Admiral. Prepare to receive boarding parties." As human vessels emerged from concealment throughout the system, realized that everything his species thought they knew about humanity was wrong. This wasn't a young civilization to be easily conquered. It was an advanced military power that had been deliberately concealing its true capabilities. The question was, how many other primitive species had the hegemony underestimated? And what other unpleasant surprises awaited the Empire's expansion? Supreme Chancellor Ayler of the Hegemony High Council stood before the assembled representatives of 200 conquered species, his ancient form radiating the cold authority that had held the Empire together for over a millennium. The towering crystalline being's faceted surface reflected the lights of the great assembly chamber, casting rainbow patterns across the faces of delegates who dared not meet his gaze directly. The loss of 2 entire fleets had sent shockwaves throughout the hegemony. Never in recorded history had their military forces faced such devastating defeats. The reports from Admiral, now held prisoner somewhere in human space, painted a picture of technological capabilities that challenged everything the Empire believed about galactic power structures. "Honored representatives," Ayler's voice resonated through harmonic frequencies that could shatter bone. "We face an unprecedented situation. A young species has somehow developed weapons technology beyond our current understanding." Murmurs rippled through the assembly chamber. The various species that made up the hegemony's ruling class shifted nervously in their specialized seating areas. Some whispered in their native languages, their translation devices creating a babel of concern and speculation. General Hex stepped forward from his position at the military command station. His form bore new marks of stress, deep lines that had appeared since receiving Admiral's surrender transmission. "Supreme Chancellor," his voice carried the weight of military tradition, "I request permission to deploy the First Fleet, 800 vessels including the Imperial flagship Dominion Eternal. Whatever technologies these humans possess, they cannot stand against the full might of the hegemony." 800 ships, General?" The question came from Intelligence Coordinator, whose scaled form coiled nervously around his data console. "The humans eliminated 400 vessels without apparent effort. What makes you believe superior numbers will succeed where tactical superiority has failed?" Hex's massive fists clenched. "Because overwhelming force succeeds where cautious probing fails. The humans may possess advanced defensive technology, but they cannot have unlimited energy resources. A sustained assault will eventually exhaust whatever exotic systems they employ." Science Coordinator Ash extended several tentacles toward the central display, her bioluminescent patches pulsing with agitation. "General, the energy requirements for the gravitational manipulation described in Admiral reports exceed the output of most stars. We're not dealing with conventional technology." "Then explain it," Ayler commanded, his harmonic voice cutting through the debate. "How does a species barely 3 centuries old develop capabilities that our greatest minds consider impossible?" Ash activated the holographic displays, filling the air above the assembly with complex mathematical equations and theoretical models. "Supreme Chancellor, based on the available data, the humans appear to have mastered large-scale manipulation of gravitational fields. This requires understanding of physics principles that our science academies classify as purely theoretical." "Could they have received assistance from another species?" asked cultural analyst, her avian form ruffling with nervous energy. Perhaps the or the core worlds. Unlikely, replied, consulting his intelligence files. Our monitoring networks show no evidence of technological transfer. The humans appear to have developed these capabilities independently. Chancellor Ayler studied the scientific projections with growing concern. His species had ruled the hegemony for 3,000 years by carefully calculating risks and responses. The mathematical models before him suggested that humanity represented a threat unlike anything the Empire had ever faced. "What do we know about their military structure?" he asked. Intelligence Coordinator activated new displays showing the scattered data collected about human space. Their military appears to be organized around what they call Terra Defense Initiatives. Unlike our centralized fleet structure, they employ distributed defensive networks throughout their territory. Distributed how? We're not entirely certain. The survivors from Admiral's fleet report that human defensive installations were hidden throughout the system, disguised as civilian infrastructure. If this pattern extends across their territory, the implications hung heavy in the chamber's atmosphere. A distributed defensive network could mean that every human system contained similar capabilities. Attacking one world might trigger responses from neighboring systems, creating a cascading defensive reaction that could trap entire invasion fleets. General Hex stepped forward, his voice carrying desperate authority. "Supreme Chancellor, we cannot allow fear to paralyze the Empire. Yes, the humans possess advanced technology, but they are still a young species with limited resources. A coordinated assault on multiple targets simultaneously would prevent them from concentrating their defensive capabilities. Or it would trigger a response that destroys our entire military," Science Coordinator Ash countered. "General, the energy networks described in these reports suggest infrastructure projects spanning entire star systems. We may be dealing with a post-scarcity civilization that has deliberately concealed its true nature." The debate continued for hours as the assembled representatives struggled to comprehend an enemy that their understanding of galactic power structures. The hegemony had built its empire by identifying weaker species and conquering them through superior technology and overwhelming force. But humanity appeared to be neither weak nor technologically inferior. Finally, Chancellor Ayler raised his crystalline form to its full height, commanding silence through sheer presence. "Enough! We require additional intelligence before committing further military assets. Intelligence Coordinator, I want comprehensive surveillance of human space. Deploy our most sophisticated reconnaissance assets." "Yes, Supreme Chancellor. However, I should note that human information security has proven remarkably effective. Our previous intelligence-gathering efforts have been limited." "Then improve them." Ayler's harmonic voice carried deadly emphasis. "I want to know the true extent of human capabilities before we decide our next course of action." What Chancellor Ayler didn't know was that his request had already been anticipated. Deep within the communication networks that connected hegemony space, human infiltration programs had been monitoring intelligence traffic for decades. Every order, every strategic discussion, every reconnaissance mission was being tracked and analyzed by systems that the Empire's best technicians couldn't detect. Dr. Sarah received the intelligence summary in her office on Earth, reviewing the hegemony's response with her usual calm professionalism. Around her, the walls displayed star charts showing the current disposition of human defensive networks, a sprawling web of interconnected installations that spanned hundreds of light years. "They're planning reconnaissance missions," reported Doctor from his analysis station. 12 stealth ships deploying to survey our border systems." "Let them look," replied, studying the tactical displays. "They'll see exactly what we want them to see." "What about their first fleet? 800 ships is a significant escalation." Doctor smiled, an expression that her colleagues had learned to associate with particularly clever strategic planning. "The hegemony still thinks in terms of conventional warfare. They believe that superior numbers and firepower determine victory. They don't. Not when your enemy has spent 2 centuries preparing for exactly this scenario." Activated new displays showing the true extent of human defensive capabilities. "The installation was just a small-scale demonstration. If they deploy their first fleet against us, they'll discover that humanity's understanding of overwhelming force differs significantly from theirs." Doctor studied the classified projections with growing amazement. The scale of human military preparation was staggering. Defensive networks that could coordinate across multiple star systems, energy manipulation technology that treated physics like a flexible tool, and strategic planning that had anticipated every possible hegemony response. "How long have we been preparing for this?" he asked. "Since first contact with the Galactic Council 200 years ago," replied. "Earth's governments recognized that our species was entering a universe filled with older, more established powers. We had two choices: remain weak and hope for protection, or become strong enough to defend ourselves. So we chose to become strong. We chose to become something the galaxy had never seen before," gestured toward displays showing research facilities hidden throughout human space. "Every colony, every mining station, every civilian installation has been part of a coordinated effort to develop capabilities that would ensure human survival in a hostile universe. The reconnaissance ships that the hegemony was planning to deploy would indeed see human installations. They would observe peaceful colonies, busy mining operations, and routine civilian traffic. What they wouldn't detect were the massive defensive networks hidden beneath seemingly ordinary infrastructure, the exotic physics laboratories disguised as research stations, or the coordination systems that could turn any human world into a fortress capable of destroying entire fleets. The hegemony was about to make their next move, and humanity was ready. But this time, the demonstration wouldn't be limited to a single system or fleet. If Chancellor Ayler decided to deploy his first fleet, he would discover that humanity's defensive capabilities extended far beyond anything his empire had imagined. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reshape the galactic balance of power. The hegemony had built their empire through conquest and intimidation, but they were about to encounter a species that had turned defensive warfare into an art form. Grand Admiral stood on the command bridge of the Dominion Eternal, flagship of the hegemony's first fleet, watching as 800 warships prepared for what would either be the Empire's greatest victory or its final defeat. The massive biomechanical being's hybrid form combined the most fearsome aspects of a dozen conquered species: crystalline armor plating from the vegan warriors, neural enhancement nodes from the collective, and combat reflexes enhanced by battle stims. For 500 years, had served as the hegemony's supreme military commander, personally leading the fleets that had crushed the last major resistance to imperial expansion. The conquered territories that sprawled across half the galaxy bore testament to his tactical brilliance and ruthless efficiency. Now he faced an enemy that had achieved the impossible, the complete destruction of two hegemony fleets without suffering apparent losses. The reconnaissance missions ordered by Chancellor Ayler had returned with even more disturbing intelligence. Human space wasn't simply defended, it was an integrated fortress that spanned dozens of star systems. "Admiral," his tactical coordinator reported, "all fleet elements report ready for hyperspace transition. 800 vessels in perfect battle formation." Studied the holographic displays surrounding his command platform. The first fleet represented the pinnacle of hegemony military engineering: Devastator-class dreadnoughts capable of shattering continents, Annihilator-class battleships armed with quantum torpedo arrays, and nimble destroyer escorts equipped with the latest stealth technology. The combined firepower under his command could reduce entire solar systems to cosmic dust. "Target analysis?" he asked. "The human designated as Earth, Admiral. Intelligence indicates it serves as the coordination center for their defensive networks. Eliminating it should disrupt whatever exotic systems they're using to project power across their territory." It was logical strategy. Cut off the head and the body would die. The hegemony had used this approach successfully against dozens of species: strike at the center of power and watch organized resistance collapse. What didn't know was that human strategic doctrine had evolved specifically to counter such thinking. Earth wasn't the center of human power. It was the coordination hub for a distributed network that could function independently of any single node. Attacking the wouldn't cripple human defenses. It would activate them on a scale never before seen in galactic history. "Hyperspace coordinates locked in," the navigation officer announced. "Transit time to Sol system, 6 hours. "Execute," commanded. 800 hegemony warships disappeared into hyperspace in perfect synchronization, their destination the small yellow star around which humanity had evolved. The fleet's arrival would trigger automated defense protocols that had been in development for over 2 centuries, systems designed specifically for the scenario now unfolding. Dr. Sarah stood in the primary defense coordination center beneath the Swiss Alps, watching real-time displays as long-range sensors tracked the incoming hegemony fleet. Around her, hundreds of technicians monitored installations throughout human space, each one a node in a network that spanned 27 star systems. Fleet composition confirmed, reported Doctor from his analysis station. 800 vessels including their Imperial flagship, they're coming in force. Expected arrival time: 4 hours, 37 minutes. Emergence point approximately 12 astronomical units from Earth. Doctor nodded, activating communication channels that connected her to defense installations across human space. All stations, this is Terra Defense Primary. Initiate Protocol Omega. Full network activation authorized. The response was immediate. From hidden installations in the asteroid belt to concealed platforms in the outer solar system, humanity's true defensive capability began to reveal itself. The Sol system, which had appeared lightly defended to hegemony reconnaissance, was about to demonstrate why attacking Earth was considered the most catastrophic mistake any hostile force could make. Network status asked. Primary grid at full power, reported Systems Coordinator Dr. Lisa Park. All exotic matter generators online. Gravitational manipulation arrays responding within normal parameters. We're ready. Doctor studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. Protocol Omega wasn't simply a defensive measure. It was a demonstration designed to end the conflict before it could spread beyond Sol system. What the hegemony was about to experience would serve as a lesson for any other species considering aggressive action against human territory. 4.5 hours later, Grand Admiral's fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. What greeted them was not the primitive defensive installations their intelligence had suggested, but something that every assumption about human capabilities. Admiral, his sensor officer's voice carried open disbelief. I'm reading massive installations throughout the system. They weren't there during our reconnaissance missions. Stealth technology? No, sir, these aren't hidden. They're actively broadcasting identification signals. It's as if they want us to see them. Moved to the main sensor console, studying readings that challenged his understanding of military engineering. The Sol system was revealed as a fortress that made the largest hegemony military installations look primitive by comparison. Massive platforms orbited every planet, interconnected by energy conduits that formed a web spanning billions of kilometers. How many installations? He asked quietly. I count. Over 10,000 major platforms, Admiral, plus countless smaller installations and what appear to be mobile defensive units. 10,000 installations, in a single star system. The engineering requirements alone exceeded the industrial capacity of most galactic civilizations. Yet there they were, broadcasting their existence with casual confidence that suggested they were merely the visible portion of human defensive capabilities. Sir, his communications officer announced, I'm receiving a transmission from the third planet. The main screen activated, revealing a middle-aged human woman in a simple gray uniform. Her calm demeanor and confident bearing immediately reminded of the previous encounters that had destroyed his predecessor fleets. Grand Admiral, she began, somehow knowing his identity and rank. I am Dr. Sarah, Director of Terra Defense Operations. Welcome to the Sol system. Human's voice carried the authority of 5 centuries of command. You will surrender this system immediately. Resistance is futile against the combined might of the hegemony's first fleet. Doctor's expression didn't change. Admiral, I'm afraid you've made the same error as your predecessors. You're still thinking in terms of conventional warfare. 800 warships represent more than conventional warfare, female. They represent annihilation. Do they? Gestured toward something off-screen. Admiral, please observe your tactical displays. I believe you'll find them educational. Turned to his sensor console, then froze in horror at what he saw. Space around his entire fleet was beginning to shimmer with the telltale signs of gravitational manipulation, but on a scale that dwarfed anything reported from the previous battles. By the deep void, he whispered, what are you doing? Demonstrating the difference between hegemony military doctrine and human defensive capabilities, replied calmly. You brought 800 ships to attack our admiral. That represents a clear existential threat to our species. Our response will be proportional. The gravitational effects surrounding the hegemony fleet weren't forming individual energy nets around each ship. Instead, the entire space around the fleet was becoming a single massive distortion field that encompassed all 800 vessels simultaneously. This is impossible, breathed, watching his instruments register gravitational forces that exceeded the output of neutron stars. No technology could generate this level of space-time manipulation. Admiral's voice carried what might have been sympathy. You've spent 500 years conquering species with conventional technology. You've never encountered a civilization that has spent 2 centuries developing specifically for defensive warfare. The space around the First Fleet continued to warp as the massive gravitational field reached full intensity. But unlike the energy nets that had destroyed the previous fleets, this field wasn't designed to crush the ships immediately. Instead, it created a perfect sphere of compressed spacetime that held the entire fleet in complete stasis. We're not moving, navigation officer reported in amazement. Drive systems respond normally, but we're locked in place. It's as if space itself has around us. What do you want? Asked, his voice heavy with the weight of inevitable defeat. His expression softened slightly. What we've always wanted, Admiral, to be left alone to develop in peace. Your empire has a choice. End hostilities against human territory and accept us as equals in galactic affairs, or continue this conflict and face consequences that will make today's demonstration seem restrained. You would dare threaten the hegemony. Admiral, I'm not threatening anything. I'm simply explaining reality. Activated new displays that could somehow see despite the gravitational field surrounding his ship. They showed human installations throughout dozens of star systems, defensive networks that spanned hundreds of light years, and energy readings that suggested industrial capabilities rivaling galactic civilizations. For 2 centuries, humanity has prepared for this moment, the day when an aggressive empire would force us to reveal our true capabilities. Your attack on our represents the crossing of a line that triggers our ultimate defensive protocols. Around the hegemony fleet, space began to pulse with energies that registered as fundamentally impossible on their instruments. The gravitational field wasn't just holding them in place. It was demonstrating control over the basic forces of physics that made conventional military resistance futile. However, continued, we prefer peace to conflict. Your fleet will be held in stasis until your government agrees to formal negotiations. Your crews will be perfectly safe, existing in a temporal bubble where seconds pass like hours. When this crisis is resolved, you'll be released unharmed. And if the hegemony refuses to negotiate? Smile held no warmth. Admiral, you're currently experiencing the gentle application of human defensive technology. If necessary, we can demonstrate what happens when we stop being gentle. As if to emphasize the point, the gravitational field around the First Fleet intensified briefly, causing every ship's hull to groan under impossible stresses. Then it returned to previous levels, leaving with a clear understanding that his entire fleet existed at human sufferance. I'll transmit your government's response to negotiate, he said quietly, his legendary pride finally broken by the reality of complete helplessness. Thank you, Admiral. I believe this marks the beginning of a new era in hegemony-human relations. The transmission ended, leaving Grand Admiral floating in his command chair, surrounded by the greatest fleet in hegemony history, all of them as helpless as insects trapped in amber. Around him, his crew worked at stations that could no longer affect their situation in any meaningful way. In the depths of space, 800 warships hung motionless in a gravitational field that physics, proof that humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history, the complete neutralization of superior numbers through technological supremacy. The age of hegemony expansion was over. The age of human defensive dominance had begun, and across the galaxy, species that had long suffered under imperial rule began to whisper about the small yellow star where an empire's greatest fleet had simply stopped. The message was clear. Attack humanity at your own risk, because they had turned the very laws of physics into weapons of defense, and they were very, very good at using them. And in the depths of space, automated systems were already beginning to prepare for the possibility that 800 hegemony warships might soon learn what it truly meant to underestimate human ingenuity. He was about to find out that humanity's defensive technologies were only the beginning of their capabilities limited only by their imagination, and their imagination was vast indeed. Just another day at the edge of human space,